Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with two very special guests. Our first guest today is Kelly Smith, and she's here to share with us her new Oracle deck, Intuitive Life Coaching Oracle. Now, many of you know Kelly. She is a mind, body, and wellness practitioner with a certification in life coaching and hypnotherapy. She's been trained in a variety of holistic healing modalities, as well as things such as NLP, holistic nutrition, past life regression therapy, homeopathic remedies, essential oils, the psychology of intuition, energy healing, and many more. So let's welcome to the show, Kelly Smith.
Hi, so nice to meet you.
Oh my gosh, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this deck. And I have to ask you, what inspired you to create this?
Well, it was kind of a journey into my own spiritual awakening. And it was just a series of events that brought me to a place where I had to learn to honor the call of my soul. And through that, when I finally kept saying yes, instead of trying to run from it and resisting it, as I said yes, I would just continue to get guidance over time. And a lot of ways that I get guidance is through my dreams. So this actually came to me in my dreams.
So how would we use this deck in our everyday lives?
So the Intuitive Life Coaching Oracle, one of the biggest inspirations for it was to help people connect with their inner self and to access guidance, but also to help them navigate everyday life situations. So it's really, really helpful for showing us our emotional patterns. And in the booklet, you'll see there's 5 different areas that the Intuitive Life Coaching Oracle card works with. One of them is manifesting, relationship healing, emotional patterns, learning to connect within with our guidance. So there's a lot of different ways that we can use this to kind of help us see what what frequency we're on, and also help us understand what's going on deep within us, but also to help us connect with our intuitive guidance.
So for those that are saying, gosh, I'm not that intuitive, how do I know if this works for me? What would you share with them?
Well, what I love about Oracle cards is that it's really happening at a subconscious level. In the booklet, I give you many different prayers to use and intentions to set for guidance that you want to know or understand about whatever's going on in your life at the current moment. And through that, we just surrender and trust that we are going to draw the right card. And we do. It's amazing. I always laugh because sometimes we'll draw a card that we don't like and we're like, oh, I don't want to hear that. So we put the card back and then we draw it again. We draw the same card.
I've done that many times.
Yes.
Yeah, obviously, Spirit's trying to share something with us when we do that, right?
Yes. And usually that's like a blind spot. That is something within us that we can't see. And you can also relate that kind of like shadow work. So we could see that in other people, but we don't see it in ourselves. So when we're resisting something like that and we pull a card, it could be a blind spot, an area that we're just not awakened to that is going on within us.
So when we look at the different cards, why don't you share a couple with us that really are pretty empowering for people? I know they all are, but there's probably a few that really speak to you.
Yes. Okay. I have my deck right here. I think what I'll do is I'll just draw us one right now, but there's many of them, depending on what you're going through, is going to speak to on a deep level. So I'm just going to draw, let me just draw a card for everyone that's listening.
Yeah, I think that's fun. We kind of do this live and have that card drawing happen.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the card that I drew is the self-love card. And what I like about this deck is that it really does have a lot of energy in it. So that when we're reading the message, it's kind of like the energy unfolds as we're reading it to help us radiate that vibration or kind of go into that energy frequency. Would you like me to redo this card?
Yeah, I would love that because we're here at the beginning of the year, and gosh, self-love is probably a big topic for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure. So, the self-love card says you're learning that your capacity to love others is directly related to your own ability to love yourself. At last, you're learning to love yourself. You are learning to trust yourself. And most importantly, you are learning that your capacity to love others is directly related to self-love. Everything you think and feel about others will change when you learn to embrace and love yourself. You can never truly be happy and content until you do. Let go of all your judgments toward yourself and learn to see the golden Buddha within. And your true essence, no matter what your life has been up until this point, you are a divine spark of love and light. No matter what you have been told about who you are merely a reflection of what you believe you are in this moment in time. This card comes to tell you that if you want to heal your relationships with other people, you have to start by healing your relationship with yourself. You're being asked to have compassion for where you are now and where you have been. Deliberately and purposely start to redefine your relationship with yourself. Be good to yourself. Be kind. Do nice things. Forgive. And see the beauty in who you really are. Have compassion. Let go of blame. Let go of the past. And let go of others' opinions of you. Other people's opinions of you are only a reflection of your opinions toward yourself. Love yourself unconditionally because you are beautiful and worthy of love.
Oh my goodness. I really love that. And it really has a person thinking, gosh, if I'm really doing this inward journey, it really is about my opinions, but we see this mirror effect that's happening with other people.
Yes, it's like a projection. It's like if we expect that other people aren't going to love us, then we kind of run that energy and it becomes an unspoken contract between us and whoever we are interacting with. It's something we deeply believe, so it becomes our experience.
Throughout your own journey, have you been just developing cards as you go? I mean, how long has this process taken you to develop this deck?
So, this is actually my first deck, but I have another one too. And this came out as an app in 2013. And there's 77 cards. And I always say that these cards are very much like lessons. I lived each lesson before I wrote them because Spirit was guiding me to speak it into words of where it's going to feel like I'm talking directly to you, but it's also channeled. And it also comes from my education as a life coach. So it's everything intertwined. And when it started, I'd say on and off, I was writing it for a year, just going into the energy of experiencing each card and each lesson. And then I would take that lesson, integrate it, and it would become a card.
I love how you did that. Now, with the artwork that goes with each card, how was that developed?
So actually this is digital art, and a friend of mine who actually published the app created the art for me for this deck, and his name is Frederick, and he's with Indigos.
So he's just a phenomenal artist to get that all together. My goodness, I love that. And it must have taken a while to just pair everything up in the way that it is, because I mean, as you're going through this journey, I'm sure some artwork probably felt a little bit more in alignment with the messaging than others.
Yes, well, it's all abstract. So I chose abstract art because I just have a special connection with abstract art. And I feel like when you look at each card, because it's abstract art, you then give it your own interpretation, your own intuitive interpretation. As you're looking at it, different shapes might pop out at you, or you might see something differently than someone else does. And I think that really helps you understand, kind of tap into that intuitive side of yourself.
Well, I know you have card number 70, Universal Bank. What is that all about?
Oh, so the universal bank is when It's based off of the law of attraction, but it's also this place that I went to visit in meditation. And it's a metaphor for everything that we want, we can have when we truly are radiating that frequency and that vibration and when we align with it. So the universal bank card just gives you, it reminds you that everything you want is here now. If you can believe it, if you can feel into it, and if you can accept it, it is here for you right now. We're always thinking, if I can't see it with my physical eyes, then it's not here. But if we believe and we hold the faith, then we open up the pathway to bringing that from the spiritual plane into the physical plane.
So when we look at doing a card deck, doing a card draw for ourselves, how does that look? Do we do one card? Do we do 3, 7? What does that look like?
There's many different ways that you can use them. So there's different spreads in the deck, and some of them you can do general readings. You can also there's one specific one in there called the self-sabotage spread. And that actually helps you to see areas where you are in resistance or emotional patterns that you have that are keeping you from moving forward. And there's also one called the relationship healing. And you could also just use it with, like, say a prayer and then ask a question, a specific question like, am I on the right path? What is the next right action step for me? What does spirit want me to know today? And then you could draw a card, or you could do a general reading, like a past, present, and future reading as well.
So let's say someone just purchased your deck and they're wanting to really kind of become accustomed to it. Do they just draw one card and get used to using it that way and then expand from there?
Yeah, so there's actually a whole guidebook on how to use the cards. It comes with a booklet, and I suggest starting out by connecting in with your cards. So you get them, you feel into them, and even reading about the different kinds of cards that I've written about and what they mean when you draw them, I think would be helpful. But also just looking at them, feeling into the energy, reading them and kind of filling the deck with your energy is helpful at the beginning. And then afterwards, you just want to focus on question, like what you want to understand, right? So on page 34 in the booklet, there's all these examples of questions you can ask, like, what do I need to heal? What's coming up for me? What's the best right action for me? And you can really just draw one card or 4 cards or 5 cards. You could make up your own spread, or you could use a spread in the deck.
So when you created this deck, was there a type of audience you had this in mind for, or just anyone looking for help during their own personal journey?
This is definitely for seekers, for spiritual people that are awakening to their spiritual gifts. That's a lot of the messages in the cards help people understand and develop and even manage their spiritual gifts. And what I mean by that is, like, if you're an empath or you are intuitive, but you don't understand what that means, or you are just kind of coming into the spiritual awakening. I think of a spiritual awakening as when the old parts of ourselves start to break down and we start to open up to and see the world in a completely different way. And through that, it can be there's a card in the deck called the Dark Night of the Soul. So it can be a really, really hard, kind of intense process at the beginning. And I developed it to help people on that journey.
So if you have to leave any thoughts with our listeners, what would you like them to know about this card deck?
That it really was kind of a labor of love that I feel like is there to help people truly see their life circumstances from a higher perspective. It's really about reaching for a higher understanding of what's going on in your life and how to move forward from there, and even to develop a deeper connection with your inner self, with spirit, with God, with the universe, and along the way, understand and heal and release and grow and evolve.
So let's talk about the coaching you do. How does this deck work with the coaching?
So, I have a life coaching certification. I'm also a hypnotherapist. And in the beginning, when I got my certification and I was really coming into this awareness of my intuitive gifts, I thought that I had to do them separately. I thought that I had to go, okay, life coaching is life coaching, hypnotherapy is hypnotherapy, and intuitive reading is something completely different. And I even at one point, I was like, I probably should get separate websites for all of them because I really didn't understand that that it was meant to come together to become something different. So for me, intuitive life coaching isn't the same as life coaching, but I draw from my experience as a life coach, but it's really more about helping the person on their spiritual journey, helping them with their intuitive gifts, and also just helping them tap into an intuitive perspective. So I feel like life coaching is very, very powerful. And also I feel like intuitive and life coaching, they complement each other so well. But I didn't think about that in the beginning. I thought they had to be separate. But when we ask the right questions, we get the right answers. And that is one of the things that life coaching does so well is it helps us to shift our perspective and our awareness and come into a new understanding of our circumstance or our situation.
So when we look at intuitive life coaching, it's really for, people, I'm not just generalizing, but just saying it's for people who are looking to, maybe attain a new level on their spiritual path or work through in a very conscious way, maybe situations they have in life.
Yes, absolutely. And while you were saying that, I just drew a card, and one of the cards is called restlessness. And this says, find a way to calm the waters of your mind. So the whole energy around this card is when we get stuck in the mental energy and we're kind of obsessing over something and we're just having this looping conversation in our head. So this card is there to help remind you that that's what's happening and that you need to take a step back so that you can actually let this go for now, because worrying and stressing and obsessing is not going to help you feel better. It's actually going to make things worse. So this card helps to kind of bring you into an awareness of that and give you tools to kind of take a step back and release that so you can shift the energy.
That's so, I'm so glad that you drew a card for that so we can share on that. And it's just interesting because I think when people think of intuitive life coaching, they're like, wow, okay, what is that going to look like? So when people show up for an appointment or they're doing an appointment remotely, what are some of the things they can expect?
So it's awesome because I always ask to be a vehicle for spirit to work through me. And each person comes with something different that they want to work on. But what I always ask people is to have a general awareness or an understanding of what they want to work on or what they want to understand. And the whole point of a session with me is to help clear any confusion, bring them back into connection with their inner self. And I always tell people that intuitive guidance, real intuitive, genuine guidance is always going to tell you what you already know. Spirit's already trying to get those messages to you so that when an intuitive says it back to you, you are like, oh, I've been getting that message. That's exactly what I've been feeling. And it helps you to gain clarity because a lot of times we're all getting intuitive guidance. We're all getting signs from the universe. We're all getting messages, but we second guess it. And so really with me, and in a reading with me or an intuitive life coaching session, it depends on what the person wants to work on. A lot of people want to work on releasing and clearing. We do a lot of energy work. Sometimes I use hypnotherapy to help them reach their goals. Sometimes I work with them to help them manifest the life of their dreams. And sometimes I work with them to develop their spiritual gifts and give them intuitive messages and help them gain clarity.
That sounds so profound. And gosh, what a great way to start the new year is to, get this clarity about your path forward and your spiritual path.
Mm-hmm.
So what final notes would you like to share with our listeners here, Kelly? My goodness, I mean, we've covered so much. I think you're so highly gifted. Love the Oracle deck. What do you want listeners to take away from your work?
But really, my passion and my purpose is to help people find their inner connection. I feel like if you don't have that inner connection, we lose hope, and we're always trying to fill a void within ourselves by, distracting ourselves with outside circumstances, or, keeping ourselves busy with social interactions. And those kind of things are just there as distractions to keep us from maybe focusing on what's really going on within us, but teaching people to come back into their self, to not be afraid to feel into their emotions, to not be afraid, because as you work with your emotions and you go deeper into them, they unfold and they release. And that is the pathway to your inner connection. And so really my work is all about helping people to have that connection, because that connection helps to bring in unwavering faith. It helps to give you clarity for your path. It helps you to see the world from a completely different perspective. And it's really about finding meaning and purpose to life.
Oh, that's so important. And gosh, what a great way to start the new year is by finding your meaning and your purpose. So, Kelly, where can our listeners connect with you and learn about your Oracle deck and how to make an appointment with you?
So I actually have, my website is www.intuitivelifecoachingwithkelly.com. I also have a podcast called Soul Keys, where I do a lot of, I call them like mini sessions. So in my podcast, I draw a card and then I channel a message and maybe sometimes do a meditation to help people clear and release and dive deeper into the lesson of the card. So it's www.intuitivelifecoachingwithkelly.com. And also I have a podcast called Soul Keys.
Well, Kelly, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Marianne.
Well, thank you, Kelly. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new Oracle deck, Intuitive Life Coaching. Again, if you'd like to connect with Kelly, you can at intuitivelifecoachingwithkelly.com for more information. Now, does it seem like everything around you is just falling apart? You'll definitely want to stay tuned for our next special guest, Amoda Maa, who's here to share with us her new book, Falling Open in a World Falling Apart. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 123 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. So today we have a very special guest. Amoda Maa is here to share with us her new book, Falling Open in a World Falling Apart. Now, many of you know Amoda Maa. She's a spiritual teacher, a warrior of the heart, sharing a fresh approach to the age-old search for spiritual freedom. Her essential teachings feature a timeless truth that is highly relevant for this moment. For contemporary seekers willing to go to the raw edge where spirituality meets humanity. So let's welcome to the show, Amoda Maa.
Thank you, Marianne.
Oh my goodness, what an honor it is to have you here.
Thank you. Yes, lovely to be here.
So what inspired you to write this book now?
Well, actually, I wrote it before now. Certainly before the global pandemic emerged. The inspiration was to pull together the essence of my teaching. So the book was really based on various live dialogues and discourses that I've given over the years, the past few years, about awakening, what it means to live that, and answering various questions from people who would come to the meetings. And then halfway through writing it, the global situation emerged, and the title had already been fixed, actually, so it was just so appropriate. And even though I speak mainly about the timeless journey, if you like, or the timeless discovery of awakened consciousness as true nature, I also speak about how that's lived in everyday life. So the world that we live in, it's very appropriate and relevant and important to speak to that during these turbulent times.
Well, and it seems when we come to the topic of openness, there's so many layers to it, more so than I ever realized. And I think that people may not really comprehend what openness really is.
Yes, you're absolutely right. There are many layers to it. What I'm really pointing to is the deepest layer, if you like, the essential openness, which is not an openness that we can choose to open to or close to. Most people, when I speak about openness, will think, oh, I feel open when I feel good or something good's happening, but I close down or shut down or when I feel threatened. Yes, that's a layer of openness that we can speak to. But what I'm speaking to is what's underneath that. What's underneath that as open awareness that's always here, whatever the circumstances, whatever the feelings we have towards those circumstances. And that's what I'm pointing to. And if we can recognize that, that's where the real transformation takes place.
What a journey that is. I mean, it's so profound when you look at it that way. And I know you talk about how openness is a doorway to freedom. What do you mean by that?
Again, I'm speaking about the deepest and really the journey of what we could call it awakening, we can call it enlightenment, we can call it liberation, we can call it self-realization, realizing our true nature, not just as a belief system, not as just some kind of method that we learn, but truly recognizing that as an energetic, visceral experience where we're liberated from the suffering of the mind's narratives, where no longer are the mind's narratives at the forefront. So we're not taking a position or an opinion or a viewpoint or a conclusion, but we're resting in open awareness. And that doesn't make us passive, and that doesn't make us living in blissful ignorance. It means that we can meet life from the freedom of not needing to defend ourselves psychologically. Yeah, I'm speaking psychologically, not physically. Not needing to defend ourselves against a psychological threat. So it's an undivided inner state in which we're free, we're liberated from the ego's narratives.
What a peaceful place that is, to get to that place where you're able to really kind of shed those layers of ego and just be free from that.
Yeah, I mean, really, when I speak of ego, or when we examine ego, and I speak about this a lot, it's really a process. Ego isn't a thing, and it's really a psychological process that we've become unconsciously identified with, or unconsciously lost in. A process essentially of defense and attack, of defensive psychological strategies, of not wanting to feel something that we think is threatening, not wanting to feel the unwelcome, not wanting to feel the overbearing or the immensity or intensity of what we might be feeling. And so a whole load of strategies are set up of avoidance and denial and rejection. Sometimes we call this spiritual bypassing, where we pretend to feel happy or try to feel happy. In the meantime, the human experience of heartbreak or loss is avoided. So it's a razor's edge, if you like, where we're neither giving in, if you like, or identifying with the heartbreak, but we're allowing ourselves to feel it, and there's still freedom within that because we're not identified with it.
Well, that brings us to a very interesting place when we think about that. And I know in your book, you talk about openness and boundaries. And, you know, it's interesting when people look at boundaries, a lot of times they're like, oh, I need to protect myself. I'm sheltering myself from something. And openness is quite the opposite. And I would love for you to share with our listeners your thoughts on that.
Again, this is where the sort of dimension, it's on a continuum. This openness is on a continuum. On the surface, we need to have healthy psychological boundaries. So when I speak of openness or point to this inner open awareness, it doesn't mean that we can't say no. It doesn't mean that we always just say yes and bow down to what is. There needs to be a healthy yes and a healthy no. But that healthy yes and healthy no can arise from open awareness rather than from the surface narratives of conditioned mind. Very often our belief in needing to defend ourselves psychologically, protect ourselves, reject our experience, avoid our experience, and so on, comes from a conditioned place. Yeah, we've learnt those strategies. We also believe at the core that we are separate beings. And if we're separate beings, then life is out there doing something to me. It's either doing something to me that I like or doing something to me that I don't like. When we operate from open awareness, there's no division of life into it's doing good things or it's doing bad things to me. There's no division between me and life itself. And again, this isn't a belief system, it's a deep, energetic, felt sense, a profound realization. And when we meet life from that undivided state, which is open awareness, then our yes and our no can come from a place of purity, clarity, presence. And there's no avoidance in that. There's no rejection in that. There's no defense in that. There's only right action.
I think that's so powerful, because coming from that place really leaves the world open to so many possibilities.
Yes, that's right. It opens up a whole dimension of new possibilities, either perspectives or the ability to see more clearly, a much wider vista than the myopic viewpoint of the ego self that's really caught up in defense and attack. It caught up in me and mine, and therefore has a blind spot. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of times responding to pains or stimulus that has been such learned behavior. When we look beyond that, it's really where all the freedom is.
Yes.
So I know in your book you talk about the power of tenderness, and I'd love for you to expand on that for our listeners.
Yes, tenderness. Well, the main question that comes up, or the most frequent question that comes up in pointing to openness, is how do I get to that place? How do I realize that? How do I live from that? And it's really less of a how, because the mind tries to work it out, but it can't come from the mind. It's an ongoing journey of conscious surrender. Again, surrender is very misunderstood, and brings up ideas of being passive, being a kind of a resignation, saying yes to everything. But it has a much deeper meaning than that. It's a surrender. Conscious surrender is a tenderness towards what is being experienced, not towards the circumstances. Yeah, that's where the no can come in. If there is abuse going on in a relationship, or there is some kind of harm, then we have every right to say no. In fact, we must say no. But before the no or the yes can arise, if we meet our own felt sense, what is being felt, what is being sensed in this moment, here, now, with tenderness, then that opens the door to open awareness, in which an intelligent response, intelligent inner guidance, right action naturally arises. And tenderness is something that almost every human being, or certainly every human being I've spoken to, understands, because everyone's felt tenderness somewhere in their life experience. And yet tenderness is something that we forget, overlook, don't give any allegiance to. And yet when it's pointed to, it can be recognized as to how, the recognition comes, how we might be being violent towards our own experience. Being violent towards our own experience is when we reject it, when we say, I shouldn't be feeling this, or I'm bad for feeling this, or I'm unspiritual for feeling this, or this feeling is wrong, or there's something in our experience that shouldn't be felt. I'm unworthy, or I'm unloved, or so we divide our experience into what is good, what is godly, we could say, and what is ungodly. And in that, we live in a divided state, and there is violence in that. So peace, freedom, and non-division, its root or its doorway is through tenderness. So even in the midst of being offended, even in the midst of being misunderstood, even in the midst of being disagreed with, and so on, we can meet that experience in our inner landscape with tenderness. And from that place, then the next decision or action or choice can reveal itself.
So with that being said, in today's climate, do you think that it's even possible for people to achieve a level of openness? Because there's so much going on. We feel so divided in so many ways.
Indeed. I don't know if it's possible. Well, it is possible for every human being to recognize true nature, to recognize open awareness. Whether every human being will is something I cannot possibly know, and I doubt is going to happen all at once at the same time for everybody. I do think there's the opportunity for that, an immense opportunity for that, for those who are ripe, for those who are ready, for those who are sick and tired of the divided state, for those who are willing to see that the division that they experience in their own lives is a reflection of an inner division. And of course, there's global intensity of division being witnessed. But the call during these times and the opportunity of these times is to meet the division that we see from inner presence and inner openness, and that's for every individual to find that within themselves, because that's the only true transformation there is, and that's that's the message that I have, and that's the teaching that I have, and that's what people are drawn to. And then beyond that, when that happens, how that happens, if that happens, really is in the realm of the mysterious unknown, or the big mystery. But certainly in times of crisis, whether it's personal crisis or global crisis, and of course it's all personal crisis, that's the time that we have the greatest opportunity to wake up out of the egoic paradigm, or get more entrenched in it. So the world will probably divide even more into the entrenchment and the awakening.
Yeah, it could go either way. I guess that's $1 million question, right? So, because you look at it and it's like, gosh, we're at this pivotal point where there's, could be such great awakening that can happen. And we have such beautiful people in the world, such as yourself, that are shining the light for people to see and go, gosh, okay, now's time to, really kind of discover what we personally are all about. And I just look at this and go, God, it must be just an amazing time for humanity. What are your thoughts about that?
I do sense that we are at a major bifurcation point in humanity's evolution. I personally feel it's important to stay as the open witness and not get overly attached to the hope or the dream or the fantasy of a sudden mass awakening and resulting utopia, or the other way, get overly attached into the hooked into the fear of mass calamity and destruction and so on, or extinction. It can go either way. It might go either way and both ways at the same time. But it's up to each individual to have the tenacity and resilience to stay as open presence and openness itself within the changes that are happening. One person becoming a light unto themselves is what it takes. Yeah. One drop in the ocean is what it takes. And that has huge impact on our inner environment, the inner environment of our own immunity system, and our outer environment of our relationships. And that's how it spreads, if you like. No individual can save the world. And knowing or having realized the deepest of within oneself, having recognized true nature, we also know that it's not, we're not actually separate individuals. There's only one beingness. There's only one consciousness. So as each, we're like waves in the ocean. So as each wave wakes up to itself and recognizes itself as the ocean, then that's it. Yeah, it's not all the waves have to recognize that at the same time, because we're not separate. We might be separate waves, but we're one ocean. So it really is a very personal responsibility that is also for the totality, for the whole. And we can't do it for anyone else, and we can't convince anyone else. We can only be that, and in being that, allowing whatever wants to flow through us, and that will, resonate or permeate into the world in whichever way it needs to, according to divine timing or divine rhythm.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It's such a personal journey that each person takes. But I love how you really discuss these and bring these topics up for people to, I think in many ways, just become aware of. Because when we look at things like reactivity to just life in general, like where are we on the scale with that, and how can we shift that?
Yes, well, reactivity is one of the primary complaints that I get. Reactivity creates such discomfort and suffering for the individual. Nobody enjoys being reactive, or not many people enjoy being reactive. So it's always a question: is how do I stop being reactive? There's only one way, and that's to become sensitive to it, to become sensitive to the mechanism of reactivity. And again, that's an individual journey. How do we do that? Well, we start to notice, and in noticing, not to beat ourselves up. It's simply an inevitable result of past trauma, conditioning, and so on, something unresolved, something unmet. And we're invited here to really practice tenderness, to watch the reactivity, to watch the mechanism, and in watching it, to be kind to it. And in being kind to it, there's a kind of slowing down that happens. And over time, we start to become more present in the midst of that reactivity, in the midst of that emotional wave that rises up. And as we become more present in it, it has no more power over us. It's a wave that rises. The emotion, the energy may rise, and it will fall like all waves. And when we don't stick to it, in slowing down, we don't stick to it. We don't become identified with it. And it becomes an energy that simply moves through us. That's the practice of open awareness. Everything rises and falls in awareness. There's always an I that is aware. There is always an awareness of what is here. Yeah. So when we're aware of the rising and falling of the wave, that's all there is, the rising and the falling of the wave. We don't have to stick to that wave and then act from that place, which is unconscious action. So it starts with vigilance, sensitivity, tenderness, and the willingness to be here with what is.
It's so interesting. You brought up something that I'd like to touch on. In your book, you have this paragraph that says, awakening has nothing to do with the achievement of a special state of consciousness. It has everything to do with presence and openness. And I found that so powerful because, how often are we searching on this path for, I'm going to reach this Buddhist state of enlightenment or what have you, when it really has to do with being present and open.
Yes. I primarily speak to spiritual seekers. My previous book, Embodied Enlightenment, was very much about the embodiment, the lived experience of awakened consciousness, of non-dual realization. So I speak to a lot of seekers of non-duality, a lot of spiritual seekers who've been on various paths like Buddhist and Zen and so on for many, many years, all very experienced, if you like, advanced seekers. And one of the primary conversations, or one of the primary obstacles that I've encountered in all those conversations, is this idea, which is either very conscious idea, they're very aware that there's a desire to achieve this enlightened state of consciousness, or it's an unconscious idea in that it's sort of driving the seeking mechanism, but they're not really aware that it's driving the seeking mechanism. So we inquire into this. What are you looking for? What are you expecting? What are you, what's driving this search? And it's mostly an idea, a fantasy, a hope, an expectation that this achievement of an enlightened state of consciousness is going to obliterate, essentially, the human experience, the pain of the human experience. And of course, it is the end of suffering. It's the end of psychological suffering. But it's not the end of the human experience. It simply means that we can be in the midst of pain, in the midst of challenge, in the midst of the unbearable, but we are in the midst of that as presence and as openness. In other words, we're not running away from it because of fear of it. We're not running towards some fantasy of a perfect state of consciousness where I don't feel anything, I don't have to feel pain, and so on. And neither are we shrinking from it, avoiding it, bypassing it, denying it, or overlaying it with some false state of peace or happiness. It simply is as it is. We can bear the unbearable, and we do not budge. We do not flinch. We do not shrink. And that doesn't come from the ego self. It doesn't come from the personality self. You don't have to be a strong person or a confident person or person with high self-esteem or any of that. You don't have to not have experienced any trauma. You don't have to have had a perfect childhood or any of that. You simply have to have the willingness, the surrender, into this moment as it is. And that is profound. It breaks open the shell of ego. And the shell of ego is actually an illusion. It's just a process of defense and attack. It doesn't actually really exist. It exists as a process, but it doesn't exist as a thing. And that's where the freedom is, in that realization.
I love that. I think that's such a beautiful place to come from. And so for our listeners that are wondering, gosh, what can I do every day in my life to move towards this awakening? What would you suggest?
You know, I'm really not a method or practice orientated teacher, if you like. I find that anything that you can do or put into practice tends to be taken ownership by the acquisitive mind, and then becomes another thing that we do, but it doesn't really penetrate all the way. Having said that, there must be something that we can some invitation that might be useful here, because for me it's more about the ongoing inquiry. When you ask the right question, then the doorway appears, and it's in that dialogue that the questions arise and the doorways appear. But let's say on a daily basis, I can only suggest that watch carefully, watch gently, watch kindly the movement of mind, the movement of mind that pulls you into what I call the flapping around on the surface. The flapping around on the surface. When you notice that, chasing this wave or that wave that arises in the mind, the invitation is to stop. To stop is to just stop chasing the narratives of the mind. Turn your allegiance to something deeper. I can't say what that deeper is. That has to be discovered, because it's not a thing. It can't be explained in words. Well, it can be explained in words, but it can be pointed to in words, but it's never it. Fall into your deepest. Have a yearning, have a longing to fall into the deepest, always. And we can all notice at some point on our journey how allegiance is given to the flapping around. I want this experience. I don't like that experience. I want to feel good. I don't want to feel this. I don't want to feel... Go deeper than anything the mind can tell you. Go deeper than fear. Fear is always an invitation to stop. Fear is always a fantasy, a ghost, a nightmare created by the mind that doesn't want to just rest and be here as it is.
Oh my goodness. I just love your book, Falling Open to a World Falling Apart. Amoda, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
Come to my website, amodamaa.com. That's Ma with a double A, Amoda Maa, all one word, .com. There's lots of videos on there. I do have a YouTube channel where I offer a lot of videos based on my live events, whether they're online or in person. They're all online at the moment. You can find out what events and gatherings are happening. And I also do a lot of writing. So you can find that writing on the website. You can also find it on my Facebook public page. Just type in Amoda Maa, and you can just find out a little bit more.
Well, Amoda, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you, Marianne.
Well, thank you, Amoda. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Falling Open in a World Falling Apart. Again, if you'd like to connect with Amoda Maa, you can at amodamaa.com for more information. If you'd like to see this book and other great books in our book club, make sure to visit moments-with-marianne.com for more information. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.